Life in a gated community was supposed to mean peace and quiet, but with HOA Karen on the board, it was more like living under a dictatorship. Karen, with her perfectly coiffed blonde bob and a constant cloud of expensive perfume, treated the HOA as her personal empire. She loved making rules that didn't apply to her and wielding fines like a scepter. Most of the time I ignored her. My driveway led to my workshop, where I restored vintage vehicles and worked on my hobby, retrofitting old military equipment for non-combat purposes. It was my slice of heaven, far enough from the HOA's usual meddling, or so I thought. Then came the Lamborghini. I first noticed it one sunny Saturday morning. I had a truckload of parts waiting to be unloaded, but as I approached my driveway I saw the sleek, bright yellow Lambo parked right across it. The car sparkled under the sunlight like it owned the place. I parked on the side of the road and got out to investigate. A familiar voice cut through the air before I could knock on the nearest door. "Oh, hi there." Karen's chirpy tone was unmistakable. She stepped out of her house, clutching a mimosa and wearing a smug grin that made my teeth grind. "Karen," I said, gesturing toward the car, "is this yours?" "Isn't it gorgeous?" she gushed, ignoring my question. "It's my cousin's. He's visiting and I told him he could park there." I took a deep breath. "You do realize you're blocking my driveway, right? I've got deliveries and work to do." Karen waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be so uptight. It's just for a little while. You don't even use that driveway all the time." "That's not the point," I said, my patience thinning. "You can't just block someone's property." "Well," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "you should have thought about that before buying a house in an HOA community. We share space here." I stared at her, incredulous. "Sharing space doesn't mean hijacking someone's driveway." Karen shrugged and sauntered back inside, leaving me fuming. I had no choice but to unload my truck in the street, all while her precious Lamborghini sat there, mocking me. Over the next few days, the Lambo stayed put, as if Karen was daring me to do something about it. I tried the diplomatic route first, calling the HOA hotline and filing a complaint. But Karen was on the board, and my complaint conveniently didn't meet the criteria for action. That's when I decided to get creative. In my workshop sat the crown jewel of my projects, an old armored personnel carrier I'd retrofitted into a functional road-legal tank. It wasn't something I used often, mostly for parades or events, but it was fully operational and as intimidating as it looked. As I stared at the Lambo from my workshop window, an idea began to form. If Karen thought she could block my driveway, it was time to show her what real road presence looked like. Karen had underestimated me. That was her first mistake. Blocking my driveway was her second. And I was about to make sure she wouldn't get a chance for a third. "You said." Karen's Lamborghini was still parked across my driveway the next morning, gleaming obnoxiously in the sunlight like a monument to entitlement. My patience had officially run out. I spent the better part of the morning prepping my armored tank. It wasn't a real combat vehicle anymore, but its imposing size, reinforced exterior, and custom paint job gave it the kind of presence that demanded respect, or fear. I'd built it for parades and local events, but today it was getting a new kind of spotlight. Inside the workshop, I adjusted the controls, made sure the engine was purring smoothly, and loaded a few props for flair. Karen wanted attention? She was about to get it. By mid-afternoon, a small crowd had started to gather. Word spread quickly in our neighborhood, especially when someone saw me rolling the tank out of the workshop. Kids were pointing, adults were murmuring, and Karen was nowhere to be seen. With the tank parked in front of my driveway, I climbed onto its top, megaphone in hand. I wasn't a fan of theatrics, but if Karen wanted drama, I was more than willing to deliver. "Attention, neighbors," I called out, my voice amplified by the megaphone. "We seem to have a situation involving misplaced property." Laughter rippled through the crowd. A few phones were raised, recording the spectacle. The front door of Karen's house finally opened, and she emerged, her face a mix of confusion and irritation. She marched toward me, mimosa in hand, looking more indignant than ever. "What on earth are you doing?" she demanded, gesturing toward the tank. I hopped down and leaned casually against the armored behemoth. "Well, Karen, since you've blocked my driveway with your cousin's Lambo, I figured I'd bring out my own ride. After all, sharing is caring, right?" Her jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous. You're being dramatic. Just move it." "Move it?" I asked, feigning confusion. "Oh, I thought we were doing the whole leave it wherever you want thing. Isn't that your policy?" The crowd chuckled and Karen's face turned red. "You're causing a scene," she hissed. "Am I?" I said, crossing my arms. "You've had your car blocking my driveway for days, Karen. I've tried being reasonable, but clearly that's not your language. Karen turned to the crowd, suddenly shifting tactics. He's harassing me. You're all seeing this, right? This is harassment. Before I could respond, one of the neighbors, a middle-aged woman named Linda, spoke up. Oh, please, Karen. You're the one who blocked his driveway. We've all seen it. Stop playing the victim. Others chimed in, their voices forming a chorus of agreement. Karen's carefully crafted facade was starting to crack. When Karen realized she wasn't winning public opinion, she stormed back into her house, slamming the door behind her. The crowd began to disperse, but not before a few neighbors gave me thumbs-ups or pats on the back. Once everyone was gone, I returned to the tank, parking it directly in front of the Lambo. I made sure it was close enough that moving the Lamborghini would require either my cooperation or a tow truck. Karen wanted to make life inconvenient? I was happy to return the favor. As I watched from my porch, sipping a cold drink, I saw Karen peek through her curtains. She was probably plotting her next move, but little did she know, I had more in store. This was just the opening act, and the main event was going to leave her regretting every decision that led her to block my driveway. You said. The next morning, the Lambo was still there, and so was my tank, standing sentinel like a steel behemoth. Karen hadn't dared come out, likely because she knew the neighborhood was no longer on her side. By noon, I saw a tow truck pull up to her house. It seemed Karen had finally decided to remove the Lamborghini, though not without a fight. She stormed outside, waving her arms and barking orders at the driver, clearly frustrated. I strolled out of my workshop, arms crossed, enjoying the scene. The tow truck operator shrugged as Karen pointed toward my tank. She wanted him to move it, but I wasn't about to make things easy. Problem, Karen? I called out, leaning casually against the tank. Yes, there's a problem, she snapped, glaring at me. You're blocking the tow truck. Move this thing. This thing, I said with a smirk, patting the tank's side, is on my property. You know, the same property your Lambo's been blocking for days. She fumed. You're being childish. No, I said, stepping closer, my tone even. Childish is ignoring someone's requests, blocking their driveway, and then acting like the victim. This is accountability. The tow truck operator, sensing the tension, stayed quiet. Karen turned to him, throwing up her hands. Well, aren't you going to do something? The man shook his head. Ma'am, he's right. His vehicle's on his property. I can't touch it. Karen let out an exasperated scream, stomping her foot like a petulant child. Fine. I'll call the HOA. I laughed. Please do. I'd love to hear how they'll explain letting you park illegally for days. Karen stormed back into her house, slamming the door once again. The HOA, as expected, didn't come to her rescue. By now, her antics had turned the entire neighborhood against her. Word of the standoff spread, and more neighbors started dropping by, not to support Karen but to watch the show. I decided to make things even more entertaining. Using a projector, I displayed a slideshow on the side of my tank. Each image showed Karen's Lambo blocking my driveway from various angles with captions like, "The Karen Mobile in its natural habitat." Driveway? What driveway? The crowd loved it. Karen, on the other hand, was livid. She finally emerged, phone in hand, yelling into it. I assumed she was calling the police again, but this time I was ready. When the police arrived, I greeted them calmly, documents in hand. Karen immediately launched into a tirade about harassment, claiming I'd trapped her car. The officer, an older man with a no-nonsense demeanor, listened patiently before turning to me. Can you explain what's going on here? Of course, I said, handing him my property deed and a timeline of events. Karen blocked my driveway with her car. I've tried to resolve this peacefully, but she refused to move it. My tank? It's fully on my property and isn't obstructing any public roads. The officer reviewed the documents, nodding. Everything checks out. Ma'am, he said, turning to Karen, your vehicle is illegally parked. If you don't remove it, we'll have to ticket and tow it. Karen's jaw dropped. But it's his fault. He's being unreasonable. The officer raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, the only unreasonable thing here is parking across someone's driveway and refusing to move. The crowd cheered as the officer handed Karen a ticket and instructed the tow truck operator to proceed. Watching the Lamborghini get towed was the icing on the cake. Karen's face was a mix of humiliation and fury, but there was nothing she could do. As the crowd dispersed, one of my neighbors approached, grinning. You really know how to handle her, he said. I shrugged. She wanted to make a scene. I just gave her the stage. With the Lambo gone and Karen thoroughly embarrassed, I climbed into my tank and rolled it back into the workshop. The battle was over, but the message was clear. Don't mess with my driveway, or me. You said. Karen's Lambo fiasco had become the talk of the neighborhood, and not in the way she'd hoped. Video clips of the tank showdown and her meltdown were circulating online, drawing thousands of views. The comments ranged from amused to outright mocking, with plenty of people calling her out for her entitlement. For a few days, Karen tried to act like nothing had happened, walking around the neighborhood with her nose in the air. But the damage to her reputation was done, and the HOA board wasn't happy about the public embarrassment. The final nail in Karen's coffin came during the next HOA meeting. I wasn't a fan of attending these gatherings, but I made an exception this time. The room was packed, with neighbors eager to hear what the board had to say about the recent events. Karen sat at the head of the table, trying to maintain her usual smug demeanor, but the cracks were starting to show. The board president, Mr. Hargrove, cleared his throat. Before we begin, we need to address the incident involving Mrs. Cartwright and Mr. Daniels. He glanced at Karen, then at me. Karen opened her mouth to speak, but Hargrove held up a hand. Karen, please. We've received multiple complaints about your behavior, and after reviewing the evidence, including video footage, we've determined that you violated HOA guidelines by blocking Mr. Daniels' driveway. The room murmured in agreement. Karen's face flushed red. But, she began, only for Hargrove to cut her off again. There's more, he said. Your actions have brought negative attention to the HOA, and your refusal to address the situation appropriately has damaged our credibility. As a result, the board has decided to remove you from your position effective immediately. The room erupted in applause. Karen sat frozen, her carefully constructed image crumbling before everyone's eyes. After the meeting, I returned home, satisfied but not smug. The situation was resolved, and Karen was no longer in a position to abuse her authority. But I wasn't done yet. The next weekend, I hosted a neighborhood barbecue. It wasn't just a celebration of Karen's downfall, it was a chance to bring the community together and turn the page on her reign of terror. I parked the tank in the front yard as a centerpiece, decorating it with strings of lights and a sign that read, "Driveways Matter." People loved it, taking pictures and joking about how the tank had become a symbol of standing up to Karen. As the sun set and the party wound down, one of the neighbors raised a toast. To Daniels, he said, grinning, and to never letting anyone block your driveway again. The crowd laughed and cheered, and I raised my glass in return. Karen didn't show her face at the barbecue. In fact, she didn't show her face much at all after that. Rumor had it she sold her house and moved to another community. Hopefully one without tank-owning neighbors. As for me, life returned to normal, or as normal as it gets when you have a tank parked in your workshop. The driveway was clear, the neighborhood was united, and Karen was a distant memory. Sometimes, standing your ground means taking a stand, and if you have to do it with an armored tank, so be it.